Welcome to Season 10 of How to Start Up, the podcast helping you start, scale your business with advice from entrepreneurs on what to do now, next, or never when scaling your company. This season, we're focusing on all things brand, so you'll hear from a series of amazing entrepreneurs on what they've learnt in their own journeys. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of the B Corp certified PR and communications consultancy, Fallowfield & Mason. Our mission is to enable you to own your communications in-house with a long-term view. With research showing 90% of marketers agree that brand language is vital for business success, your business needs to speak confidently and clearly. Given this, I wanted to learn from an expert on how you can differentiate your brand's voice in an overcrowded market. In this episode, we hear from Millie Kendall OBE, renowned brand builder and founder of the British Beauty Council, Brand-Led Communications, and Ruby & Millie, the makeup brand. Millie founded the British Beauty Council in 2018 to nurture talent, growth and development within the industry. Keep listening to hear why Millie thinks brand voice is critical for any brand and how to begin defining yours. Hi Millie, thank you for your time today on How to Start Up. It's wonderful to have you on. Before we get into everything around brand voice, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and a bit about the background of your career.
Yeah, so my name is Millie Kendall. I'm the current CEO of the British Beauty Council. I also jointly own a media agency called Brand-Led Communications, which specialises in print and digital comms for beauty brands. I've tried to dabble in other topics, but beauty is my true love, so I'll stick with that because I seem to be quite good at it, hopefully, quite good at it. And previous to that, I was one half of a makeup brand called Ruby & Millie that was in about over 100 Boots stores, Selfridges and Harvey Nicks as well. Before that, I launched brands like Aveda, L'Occitane, Tweezerman, Shuemura into the UK from sort of throughout 2 decades from about 1990. And before that, I was a hairdressing assistant and I washed hair for a living, but never really made it onto the shop floor successfully. You would not want me to cut your hair ever.
Well, it sounds like beauty has been with you as a great love throughout your entire career. But with that, we all know that branding is so important in the beauty industry.
Yeah.
But as I find in the work that we do with clients, brand is a very interesting topic of discussion, and it can often be linked to ego in a way, because a lot of people will want to look at their logo or their website and their branding, and then they don't think further than that in terms of their brand. Given this episode is all around brand voice, how would you define a brand's voice?
Yeah, so that's really interesting what you said there, because I think that not just beauty, but I think generally the brand is meant to effectively communicate to the consumer what you stand for. And I think branding has changed quite a lot. And oftentimes you're not necessarily aware of what that brand stands for. You're buying into a brand logo, for example, because you feel like it adds gravitas to you and your style and who you are. So I think over the past sort of few decades, to be honest with you, I feel something sort of a bit lost in that brands to identify as opposed to effectively be part of a tribe or a community. So I think that people are just buying branded goods because they think it says something about them, whereas they're not really looking into what the brand is trying to say about itself. And I feel like that can be quite confusing sometimes, because I think that brands should be able to show their ethics and their efficacy. That's what I want from a luxury brand, for example. I want ethics. I want, standing. I want to know that everything they do is good for the people, for the planet, for profit. I want to know that there's depth to what they're communicating. I think that some people will just buy a brand just because they like the logo.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, this sounds like brand is so much more than just the logo. And when you're looking at a business, you have words and images, and the two need to marry up. They need to be consistent. They need to talk to each other. But I found a lot of founders get distracted by their image, and they don't think about the words and the story and the community and that ethical part behind it of how you feed SEO through your communications.
Do you know what's a really interesting, I think, sort of case study in that regard is that if you look at Chanel, and there's a TV show on at the moment on Netflix about Dior, and you look at Chanel's alignment with the Nazi party during the war, and how the effect that had on her brand at that time when she was trying to reinvent. Whether that's true or not, there are two sides to that story, obviously. But I think that there's a lot to be said for efficacy and values in a brand identity. And I think you're right. I think a lot of times that gets lost. And there's a lot of damage in that. I mean, if you look at like founder-led brands, particularly in the beauty industry, oftentimes when they get bought for the big bucks from a larger corporate organization or FMCG, the brand loses its identity as the founder is sort of slightly ousted because, the company want to take the brand in a different direction or whatever it may be.
So the actual voice of the brand has left.
The voice, the values, everything that was the founding principles of that brand, even if the corporate parent or new owner, whoever, whatever you want to call it, even if they try to emulate it, oftentimes it's a real struggle without that founder. You have to, as a new owner, align yourself so well with the values of the founder in order to make it work.
And it's that voice of the brand, of what the brand stands for. Because obviously when you found a business, you know what you're trying to do with your business and you have your vision and your mission and your purpose. You find your way with it and it can change and evolve. But establishing that brand voice, how important do you think that is to do before you even think about packaging, distribution, marketing?
Yeah, I think, again, that goes back to efficacy, because why would you start a brand if you didn't want to start something in your own DNA, if there wasn't a purpose for it? What's the purpose for starting a brand? Starting a brand just because you want to start a brand seems sort of quite vacuous and a bit vain, really. If you want to start something or you want to create something because you feel that there's a gap in the market or something hasn't been happened, or you've got true innovation, or, there is a real need to find a solution to a problem, or there has to be a sort of raison d'etre. And I sometimes find that brands are just launched and there really isn't any reason for its being. And it just doesn't seem to manifest into anything particularly exciting or going places. So I think that, I often find when I talk to people about branding, the brand should reflect who you are. And I used to have a designer that would ask me to put 12 things of my own, things from around my house or work, into a box. And they would design the brand based on that, me, in a box.
Really?
Yeah. So rather than me say, hey, I want it to be blue, if I then took 12 things from my house, put it in a box and gave it to them and everything was orange, then there would be orange, not blue. What I say and who I am are two different things. So I always think it's really important to kind of like put in a box 12 of your favorite things that you love at home, and then see what that looks like in a sort of almost objective place, photograph them, pin them up on a board. Because I think that's really identifies what your brand will look like if you're going to build it in your own DNA. And then I think that generally we sell to people like ourselves. So our customer is ourselves in a lot of ways.
We're fixing a problem we found that we've come up against, and we build the solution.
Exactly. And what you don't want to do is to go too far out of your sort of realm of comfort, and you need to create something sort of in your own identity. It's kind of like being God.
But also you need to be so sure of what you're doing, because you're going to work all hours that God sends. You need to be resolute in your value of what you are doing. And
I would say be 80% sure of what you're doing.
80? Why 80?
I don't know. I just don't think you'll ever be 100% sure or happy with what you've done.
Oh no, and that is definitely a question of when is enough, and that metric of success of what have I done my brand well enough, or have I succeeded? Like every business owner will have the same imposter syndrome, and that's a part of the drive. But with your experience with the British Beauty Council, which large companies do you think have strong brand voices in your opinion?
Charlotte Tilbury, definitely. I mean, Charlotte's brand. Yeah, absolutely.
Because she is the voice. She is actually speaking about the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's her personality through and through. Absolutely.
I mean, actually, really, Lisa Eldridge, Isabel French, a lot of the makeup artists do that very well, and so do the hairdressers. I mean, Sam McKnight, the sort of cheeky names on his products, totally reflect him, his sense of humour. The products smell like his garden. that's what I mean about pour your DNA into that brand. I think it's so effective.
To know you quicker and understand your product faster, which ultimately in this very crowded airspace today is a very big blessing.
That's probably the most, I mean, even, God, somebody sent me Larry King's hair products the other day. Absolutely brilliant. Looks beautiful in my bathroom. I love everything about this product. They smell great. I love the tubes. I think and I can immediately think, I really want a haircut with Larry. It makes me think that. So pour your DNA into a bottle. That's it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And that builds that loyalty and that familiarity, I think. And it's not confusing where you've got so much consumer choice. And we talk to lots of clients about owning their PR and where they're like, but it's the most amazing skincare product on the market. It's like, but the market doesn't know that yet. What would you say they should do first when looking at a brand's voice? Because we often, as we mentioned before, see people go into design mode and 10 different iterations of a logo and their brand colors, but for their voice of how to establish what their brand tone and voice is going to be, other than the 12 elements of their personality in a box, are there any other hacks that you would give them of go for a long walk or talk to your grandmother?
I think if you've got a brand name, tone of voice, packaging, what is in the product, etc. You've got all of these different elements to make up your brand. I think you need to go with what you feel most comfortable with and what pops into your head first.
Well, we do a lot of work with clients about, do you know who your competition are? Have you done your market research? Because we can go
how many don't
blindly. Yeah, they blindly think they've done something that no one else has ever done before. But someone, I remember when I lived in Australia, someone said this. They said, it's the shark you can't see that bites you. Yeah. And so the first thing we do is look at the market and look at where they're positioned and who they're trying to talk to. Because it's one thing trying to say what you want to say, but it's another thing making sure you're speaking to the right audience. And with brand voice, I think that's so important to then, once you know your audience, work backwards as to what they want to hear.
Well,
does that
oftentimes
gel with
they
you?
don't know the audience at all. They've just come up with an idea and they're trying to reach an audience that is not akin to them. The great thing about Lisa Eldridge is she'd built up a YouTube following of over 1 million followers. So she already had an audience. Caroline Hirons already had an audience. They know their audience. So therefore, when they're building their brand, they are it's creating a product in their DNA that suits the audience that they've already got. Very difficult if you don't have an audience. I once had somebody come to see me and they were like, we've developed this piece of technology. It's completely new. It was like an espresso machine for skincare. So you could get your skincare in a little sachet, sort of little pod thing every day. You would read your skin with a telephone, with an app. And about 3 days later, I got an email and somebody else had got exactly the same thing. I mean, they can't have both come up with it overnight. Someone was obviously selling them the technology, saying it's completely bespoke to you. They hadn't done the research. So, it's very unusual that it's really difficult to be the first to market with something. And you don't always have to be the first to market with something that's completely innovative. You can sort of slightly reinvent the wheel, but you don't have to completely reinvent it. And so doing your research is really vitally important, really important.
Yeah. And I think where you can gain that market share is being one of the best in the market. And when we look at PR talking points, you've got your unique talking points as a brand, but then you've got your market talking points and you could be a leader in that market. But you would agree with your competition on quite a lot of these things because you all recognize there's a need for this product. But in terms of differentiation, how much do you think a brand voice needs to be unique? Or could it actually be quite similar to competitors out there?
I mean, I think that's an argument for, when Lisa Eldridge launches a tinted moisturizer or a foundation, there are thousands of foundations on the market. Why am I buying Lisa's? One is I trust her voice. Two is I like the packaging. I believe the product is a good product. The color range is amazing. The communication of what she's developed, I find the video content appealing, the imagery appealing. And so it doesn't mean that her foundation is the most superior. There might be others that are equally as good or even greater. I don't know. It depends what you're after. But the fact is that every detail has been thought through.
Trust is there.
And trust is there, which is so important.
Yeah.
Then it goes to values and efficacy for me. I align with her values, her specific focus on makeup artistry and getting that just perfect finish. And I believe that everything she does, she will do with integrity. And I think it's really important.
When we're all short of time and we want the decisions made for us, I think, especially in cosmetics, but definitely not limited to this, when there's trust built with a brand or a business or a service, I know now I've worked in a co-working office for the last 3 years. All my band of brothers have got me on to taking more protein into my diet. And I'm not going to be that person that's taking protein powder. But as of yesterday, I am. And I surveyed them. I did my research. I looked at the brand's Instagrams. I looked at their values. One of them was B Corp. So that was a big thing for me because that stamp of approval of B Corp, it was already there. Looked at the pricing, looked at the packaging, looked at how easy it was going to do. I had to do all of that. But now that I'm on a subscription with them, I'm probably not going to reevaluate that for at least a year. So that trust, when you get that in, but that brand voice that came through referrals, it came obviously originally from the founder, and then the founder to the team to the packaging and the copywriting and the consistency around that, and then to the clients. That to me is a really good success story when you're getting hit by that same brand from so many different touch points.
Yeah.
And with that leads me to my next question of, how dangerous is it to evolve a brand voice or change it?
Well, I don't think that it is particularly dangerous. In a way, true brand voice will always evolve because we are, as human beings, always evolving. I think the wonderful thing about having your own brand is it can evolve. I mean, British Beauty Council, for example, it's evolved, but it hasn't changed. I think there's a difference between the evolution of a brand and completely changing it from, black to white, white to black, whatever. It's, our brand voice was raising the reputation of the industry, enhancing education, investing in innovation. We had this sort of mission statement that I still use to this day, really, even though times have changed. That was pre-COVID, pre-Brexit, pre-Russian war. I mean, it's not, we've evolved, but we've grown and we've developed and we're much cleverer at it. And we're much more succinct at saying who we are and explaining it in a very, very short space of time because people are more than ever. And it's very
the one breath answer.
We've taken out, for example, the amazing Robin Derrick, who used to be creative director of Vogue, created our logo, but he created it with these strap lines in between the British Beauty Councils. When it was small, you couldn't read it. And actually, it turned out sort of 2.5, 3 years down the line, somebody asked me what it said and I couldn't even remember it. So I was like, get rid of it. So we got rid of it and no one's ever noticed. Still the same logo, just certain things have evolved. And I think that's the wonderful thing about being a brand owner and creating a brand is you can evolve your brand for sure.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse because where you've got so many decisions to make on a minute by minute basis and then you're like, oh, shall we redesign our brand? It's like, is that the best use of our time?
No, I never approach it like that. Somebody sent me an email the other day and said, as the leaders of legislative change in the beauty industry. So I said, oh, that's our new strapline, leaders of legislative change in the beauty industry. It doesn't normally, I don't normally sit down and go, let's rebrand this. Normally someone will say something and like the penny will drop and I'll think, God, I must have been thinking about that. It's sort of, oftentimes it's a bit of an opportunistic move in a different direction that kind of does change.
It lands when it's ready.
Yeah. But I've never sat down and gone, let's redesign everything. It's never really worked like that.
I interviewed Julian, who founded Create Academy, about vision, mission and purpose. And that was so interesting because he's, I think, 4 years in. And your vision and your mission are kind of these bedrocks, your business. Your purpose is now incredibly important. That's coming up and up and up more often than it ever has done. But your brand voice, I think, is sort of a layer on top of that bedrock where it can evolve and change and grow.
I mean, I guess the thing is with the British Beauty Council for me, which has been quite challenging, is I remember when I met with Caroline Rush from the British Fashion Council when we first started the British Beauty Council, because we're sort of we're sort of sister organisation. And she said, this isn't your company. It's not your business. You can't just do what you want. But the fact is that the voice is still mine. And so sometimes when we are posting things on social media or whatever, I'm very factual and very fast. I don't use a lot of ands, ifs and buts. I like, don't put too many don't put that over, 20 times in a sentence. I'm very clear. I like to be very forthright about stuff. And it's like authoritative, really clear, straightforward. no sort of skirting around the issue, get straight to the point. And so actually the brand voice is mine. And it does take some time for new members of the team to pick that up. So they'll send me a draft of an email they're sending out to their patrons or something. I'll go, oh, it's just fluff, fluff, fluff. Take that, take that, you know. So
it's not on the brand tone of voice, yeah.
Tone of voice. I think tone of voice is really important. I think that's where Charlotte gets it so right.
You know what to expect, and you're not surprised when you see a new product launch that's a bit cheeky because the brand is a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
And actually, I have to say, I'm wearing a full face of Charlotte Tilbury makeup because I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It ticks all the boxes.
I don't actually have any makeup on today, a little bit, but generally speaking, whatever. I mean, yeah, we all do. Yeah. I mean, my 17-year-old daughter and I'm 57 and we both wear it. Even though British Beauty Council isn't my brand, I've developed the brand and it is in my voice. When there is a new CEO, whoever that might be, at some point, the brand voice might change and evolve a bit, but it will always have elements of me in it. It can't not.
What would you say were the biggest errors that you have seen in people getting brand voice wrong?
God,
it might be a whole other episode.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. Generally speaking, when people come and they ask for a bit of consultation, if I don't feel like they really are that brand, I can't. I mean, okay, here's a prime example. We ran a competition in 2019 called the Next British Beauty Brand. And there were certain precursors to coming in to presenting the brand to us. One is you had to have been in business for a year, a registered organization, company, whatever on Company's House. So you had to be a bona fide organization. And you had to stock in the warehouse, like ready to be able to sort of distribute the product wider than where it was already. And we had about 10 brands come to pitch. And the ones that really worked were the ones that had a really good backstory. You know, they were really emotional. You could really you could feel that brand was going places. One guy came in and you could tell he was from some corporate entity and they had developed something and they wanted to tick a few boxes. We are so-and-so friendly. We are so-and-so friendly. We are this friendly, for this friendly. Everything was friendly. We're, environmentally friendly. We're LGBTQIA friendly. We're this or that. He was so just a marketing guy at some large company trying to create the next, I don't know, Dizziac or Shake Up or whatever, the new sort of hot brands. And it was just so obvious. They were just ticking boxes, really.
There's no soul to it. Yeah.
No efficacy.
I absolutely love this because we often say to clients, you are your own best storyteller because you have created that brand and owning that and being passionate about it. I think that passion that comes through from brand owners and business owners, and, we work with lots of service-based businesses as well. It's so true that soul and personality, especially at the beginning, it drives everything, including how people understand it.
Even if you look at something like MAC Cosmetics, it's now owned by Estee Lauder. It's been owned by Estee Lauder for years and years and years and years. It was a two Frank Toscan and the other Frank, two Canadian guys who developed it. The brand was really about freedom of expression. Even to this day, that brand still reeks of freedom of expression.
And you go to it for that.
And it's still there in the brand DNA. I mean, Lauder are very good like that with, there are sometimes hiccups with founders and things, but you do get sort of, Joe Malone, Bobby Brown, even Aveda. And I worked for Aveda for a long time, lived and breathed that brand. It was his, everything about that brand was so well thought out.
And on brand.
And I think still to this day, Lauder do that very, very well. They keep the community close and they keep the brand identity real. It evolves. It's gone from being the two Franks in Canada to global domination to being a Lauder linchpin. But you can still honestly say that brand is about freedom of expression.
And that's what I think a lot of people kind of get tripped up on is like, we need to be on brand. Hang on, but we don't know what our brand is yet. So it's doing that work at the beginning and not hurrying it and not being so quick to market that you've forgotten to do that initial research. Is there anything you would have done differently when creating your brand for any of the hats that you've worn with Ruby and Millie, with the British Beauty Council, with Brandstand?
No, not really. I don't think there's anything particularly I would have done differently, mainly because a lot of the mistakes I made were what made the brand better. With Ruby and Millie, the only thing that I would have changed would probably have been the contract side of everything, the sort of legals. That was it was quite challenging for us as the brand started to develop and grow, because Ruby and I were in a much weaker position. Now I'm a lot older. I would never have signed that contract.
But you don't know what you don't know at the beginning.
Don't know what you don't know. But in terms of the branding and sometimes I think I fire a little bit too soon with things. So I would have to say I had a brand called Beauty Mart, a shop called Beauty Mart. Branding was very much like, and my business partner and I have a very similar taste. And we created this idea for a shop. We wanted to look like a Brian Ferry album cover with like a Japanese drugstore thrown in, and we wanted everything black with neon, and but even with Ruby and Millie, it was way ahead of its time. I don't ever look back on things and say I regret them. I might have put them in a different order. That might have worked better.
Well, goodness, experience is what you get after you've needed it. So you can always look back.
Yeah, and I think you have to take success in different measurements. So, Ruby and Millie was a huge financial success, but really the biggest success story of Ruby and Millie for me was the concept behind the distribution of that brand and how we did a deal with Boots up front, which nobody ever knew. I mean, even people at Boots don't even know that. And they poured all the money into it. So it was like £7 million was put into that brand up front. And then we sold it in Harvey Nichols and Selfridges, so that everybody assumed it was a premium brand that we developed, that we put into Selfridges and Liberty. And then we sold it in Boots. And now that seems like quite a common distribution model. But back then, nobody launched in Selfridges and Harvey Nichols and then went into Boots. You just wouldn't have a brand in those two different environments. So even that part of the brand, the fact that the brand was developed to be a sort of very nice premium looking product that was sold in a mass environment, even the pricing of the brand was quite unique at the time, because you only had premium and you only had mass. So even that part of the brand is quite important.
It's interesting. I've spoken to a lot of founders, not just on the podcast, but generally. And you ask them, is like, what mistakes would you go back and undo? It's like nothing, because it's got me here today. And it's so important to learn the hard way sometimes. And it is hard work, but it's rewarding.
I would have slept more. That is the one thing I think.
I had the privilege of interviewing Russell Foster, who's, I think, the head of neuroscience and sleep at Oxford University. And he's like, you're running a red light on your business if you don't get enough sleep. Yeah. That's really shocked me, of you have to put your life vest on yourself first before your business, because if you don't exist, the business certainly won't. He's a sweet, sweet man, but he gave me a very sort of big warning.
Telling off.
Yeah, you're human.
Really, you need to sleep. It is really difficult. If there's one thing I could have done, the one thing I would have changed, I would have slept more. That's it. Absolutely 100%. That's the only thing I would have changed. I feel like I missed 10 years of my life because I didn't sleep.
Well, you're very busy because you've got so many different careers going on at the same time, which I have huge admiration for. Our next season's about productivity, so I might have you back on and ask about how you manage it all. But something we do is, the guest before, which was Lucy Cleland, who founded the magazine Country and Townhouse, she had a question for you, and that was, how are you going to differentiate yourself from your competitors? And this is quite tricky because the British Beauty Council is its own thing.
Yeah, we don't have any competitors. I don't know if I've ever done anything where I've had
standalone. Yeah.
That's the thing, is to develop something that is truly unique. Therefore, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I still look at lots. We just launched a membership platform, but actually I looked more at things like Soho House and how they manage members.
Or looking at asymmetrical competition or similar functioning. Yeah, that's interesting.
I tend to do that. I tend to look at brands that I think have had great success that aren't necessarily operating within my space. So for Ruby and Millie, I was really attracted to Danish design and food packaging when we were developing the sort of style of the brand. And I hired a fashion PR, not a beauty PR, to manage the public relations for the brand. And so I tend to look outside of my industry. So when we developed the British Beauty Council, a lot of the elements of that we've adopted are from the Fashion Council. That's how I tend to look at my competitors. They're not normally operating in my space.
I remember once it was my previous employer to the one that I'm in now, which is obviously my own business, but the Graf Diamond family, I went down into the workshop and I saw this new machine. I was like, well, guys, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's this crazy laser from the dentistry industry that we're using with jewelry. But you don't need to know about that. I'm like, are you kidding? That's an amazing PR angle. That it was just that cross-pollination. I remember at Chanel, they used to look at, I think it was in NASA, at foam in materials in rockets to help foundation become bouncier or something like that. Yeah. So you can never not learn from someone else.
I think it's really interesting to look sort of across the aisle, sort of outside of your sort of your industry. Some of the most interesting products have come from outside of our industry. You're right. Some of the technologies, you took look at like this seaweed and peptides and thalassotherapy and things that have come from the ocean or they just come from different parts of the world, different places. I don't necessarily develop things that have a natural competitor within my space. Yeah. So that's never really been a challenge for me.
And what would be your question for our next guest?
I do have a question. When do you know that you're ready to scale up? And I think that's really critical because I have a lot of brands coming through my door that have borrowed a bit of money from friends and family. Yes. And I think they're ready to scale up. And I don't think they are. I'm no investment expert. I've really never raised investment in that sort of traditional way. But when do you know that you're ready to scale up?
It's a really hard question because it is another job. And anyone I've met who's gone through a raise or looked for investment or tried to grow faster, it becomes another day job, whether you've already got 20, adding a 21st.
Yeah. That's the other thing. So when you're raising investment, you are being taken out of the business to raise investment as a founder. Do you replace yourself? You can't replace yourself. You're the founder.
So it's finding those magic hours. And that's where I think sleep becomes so precious. Yeah. And it's not protected because it's one thing that can go.
You can really lose sight. You can really lose sight of your mission because you're sort of busy trying to sell yourself. The other thing is that you're always at that point that gets that sort of startup to scale up point. You're always in danger of pivoting your brand too much to please an investor. And that's what I mean about the branding thing. Evolve your brand, don't change it. Because what happens is that an investor will say, well, I really like your brand, but I think everything should be mauve. And God, let me go back and make everything mauve. And then next guy will go, I don't really like the mauve, but I think everything could be square.
Like, and they don't know.
It's like, it's that sort of slightly,
And I think a lot of people said that as well, when they have investment, it's like they've suddenly given themselves a boss, whereas previously when you're self-employed, you don't have one.
True, yeah.
And you can miss that senior support. But with investors, be careful who you're taking investment from because they will have an opinion and they will want to be heard. And then it's the management of those stakeholders. There's another job there. So
I had a business and there was a gentleman on the board. I call him a topic creep. He's just leaned back, sort of waving his tie. And he used to make my business partner cry. Every single board meeting, he made her cry. And we'd taken investment, not much investment. In fact, he didn't even really have the right legally to sit on the board. He was there in an observer capacity, but he never shut up. And one day I just called him up and I said to him, do you know what? I'm going to just let you know right now that you are not invited to another board meeting. He goes, well, I think you might have overstepped the mark. You can't say that to me. And I said, do you know what? I've actually done my homework. I've checked the legals. Yes, I have. I am well within my rights to ask you not to come. And by the way, you make my business partner cry. I don't want you in the room. And I never saw it again. And it was great.
Oh, go you. I love that, though. I love that.
Yourself a bit. Or stand up for someone else, He was horrible to her. Absolutely awful.
I have heard this a lot. Yeah. It's people say to me, if you can hang on to 100% as long as possible and it's still growing, do, because be careful who you take investment from. It's a whole other. That's why we did a season on investment, because it's such a topic where people are like, we don't know what we're doing. Making mistakes. Thank you so much for your time, Millie.
Thank you so much. Really good to chat. I love chatting.
I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation. You can find a recap of all the advice so kindly shared by our guest in the show notes, along with their contact details. We'd love it if you could rate and review or share this podcast, because it really does help other people discover it. To incentivize this a little, I would very happily offer you one of our PR guides on how to share editorial coverage legally. Just DM us or send us an email, hello@fallowfieldmason.com, with review in the title, and we'll share it on.